Welcome back to the Spectra Creative channel with me, your host, Scott, ToyGuru Neitlich. And today we're doing a video about HasLab, both because I really like HasLab, I'm a customer of HasLab, and oddly I get a lot of questions about HasLab on this channel. And the biggest one is, how are they related to Hasbro? Is it a different company? Are they licensed out by Hasbro? And well, no, they are Hasbro is the answer to that. Much as Matty Collector, when I was at Mattel, which is very similar as a program, Matty Collector was Mattel. It was just a brand within Mattel. And HasLab is a brand within Hasbro. It's worked on by Hasbro employees, just as Matty Collector was worked on by Mattel employees. So why am I making a video about HasLab today when I worked at Mattel, not Hasbro? Well, I'm also a collector besides being a toy designer and a toy marketer. And I really think what HasLab is doing represents the future of adult collecting. And I want to talk about why. So let's just do a quick review. For those of you who do not know or do know and need a reminder, HasLab produces really big items like sail barges and giant robots. Things that really couldn't sell at retail, both from a price point and a where in the world are you going to stock this item. The other factor keeping these items from being produced for retail or even e-tail, like on Amazon, is the fact that these items are incredibly expensive to produce. And it's a risk to make an item like this, and that's why they do a pre-sale method. So some items which don't move forward don't hit the pre-sale, but you can see the meter right there, just like on Kickstarter. It's basically Hasbro's version of Kickstarter, much as Matty Collector was that for Mattel. And when an item does go through, Hasbro and the HasLab team continue to update fans as they go, with updated images showing the development of the product all the way to when it's going to show up in your mailbox. They also have recently started doing tiers similar to Kickstarter, where the more backers they get for a project, they can unlock additional items, alternate heads, extra figures, add-on parts, things that weren't included with the initial offering, but as an enticement to get higher number of backers. They've also included things like books about the making of the project, as well as, again, constant updates throughout the process, which is very important for the adult collector, not just because we want to see how the product is going to look at the end of the day with our action figures on it, but being part of the process and being along for the ride is really part of the purchase. The purchase isn't really just for an object, a very large toy, but you're also buying into an experience, kind of like going to Disneyland. What you're purchasing is both a product that you're going to get in the mail and the ability to follow it through the design stage and watch it get made and get updates and get exclusive behind-the-scenes looks at how it's being designed and made, and maybe even have some input on different aspects of it. Should it have this paint app? Should it have that paint app? Etc., etc. And Hasbro has done a great job with this, especially doing even videos showing the development of a product and how it's coming along, having their HasLab team speak directly to consumers and let them know really, what's happening with their purchase. This is, similar to what we did on Matty Collector. I was the brand manager for Matty Collector and Mattel back in 2012 when we did Castle Grayskull in a very similar way. It was something that we unveiled to fans. We showed blueprints of it for how big we wanted it to be, how big we hoped it could be, hoping that it wasn't going to change too much when it went into production. And, even doing things like making a cardboard cutout of how big it was going to be and posing it with figures. This was basically our way of what HasLab is doing now. They have digital models. We didn't have digital models. We had a piece of cardboard that we put up. But we also had a meter, similar to what HasLab is doing, where you could follow along and see how much longer you had until you hit the goal. And things like Castle Grayskull, it did hit its goal. And as we went into production, we would do updates and show, the pre-production samples and, really celebrate with the fans, because the fans were the ones that made it happen. This was a process. It wasn't just about getting the toy. It was about, much like I said with HasLab, being along for the ride and getting to enjoy seeing the product happen. So what's the difference between Matty Collector and HasLab? And I think HasLab does a lot of things different and sometimes better. One, they have a lot of company support for what they're doing. HasLab is clearly something that has the backing of upper management, and it's a company priority as an outreach to collectors. They can also tell you actually what the quota is, which is something Mattel couldn't do. Now, I'm not saying Matty Collector was the wild, wild west, but for Mattel, the focus, at least back when I was there running Matty Collector, was much more on the big brands, your SS Barbie and your SS Hot Wheels and HMS Fisher Price, etc., things like that. These collector lines were more done because they could, the team was willing to do it. Instead of having a giant battleship, it was kind of more like we were paddling along in a leaky canoe. But we loved our canoe, and it was full of joy and happiness, and we were just glad to have the resources we did. The other thing HasLab does differently is they have all of their customers pay up front for the expensive tooling and the development of the item. This is something we talked about doing with Matty Collector, but honestly, I thought people were going to turn into an angry mob if I asked them to do this. So we did not ask people to pay until the item shipped, and that kind of backfired because we had a lot of people not pick up their product. And yeah, that was kind of an issue. So why is HasLab the future of collectibles? So looking at collectibles at retail, really the only place they're sold is that back wall in Target and Walmart where you see things only aimed at the adult collector. And what does the adult collector like to do? Well, we don't play with our toys, we display our toys. I mean, maybe sometimes we play with them when no one's looking. But really, finding a way to see all of our figures, which to us are basically trophies of our toy hunts and our collecting over the years, and it's been decades now, well, what HasLab is doing is finding a way for us to take our figures and now display them. We already have all the figures. Now, HasLab is providing what I consider the ultimate way to display your figures. This is what adult collecting is all about. It's all about trophying, as in the verb to trophy. I know, I made that up. But if you go into a man cave or, a woman cave, whatever the area that we have at home that we display our action figures in that our spouse doesn't like to go in, well, that's where we put them in, whether we're putting them on a shelf or we somehow have the ingenuity or money to create a full diorama, like some companies do at San Diego Comic-Con now, displaying figures in an environment to really make them come alive. There are some adult collectors who can do this. Not all of us can afford to do this, though. Hasbro and Mattel obviously have huge resources, so building these huge dioramas at trade shows like Comic-Con is pretty easy for them to do. For the adult collector at home, not so much. And that is exactly where I see the positioning of companies like HasLab or divisions like HasLab. Yeah, it's awesome to get a Sentinel, but what you're really doing with that Sentinel is you're going to pose it with your other X-Men figures, maybe just like this with Wolverine caught in the tentacle. Likely, once you set up the Sentinel, you're not going to move it that much. I mean, maybe you'll swap out the heads or the arm for the alternate parts, but it's pretty much going to sit there. It's actually a lot like the old G.I. Joe aircraft carrier, the USS Flag, which was so big, the only place to store it was under a child's bed. And it really was just a place to kind of display your other toys. I mean, yes, it had play value. I'm not saying it didn't. But things that are this big, this huge, tend to be more display pieces than play pieces. So while the sail barge is really just, yet another Star Wars vehicle, and it could be it could be viewed as a vehicle, just as much as an X-Wing or an A-Wing or a Snowspeeder there, and just on a larger scale, the sail barge is really a display piece. So we've been collecting action figures for years now, really decades, since adult collecting boomed in the 90s. It's been, now 20, 30 years since adult toy collecting really hit mainstream and became acceptable with things like Big Bang Theory and 40-Year-Old Virgin. And having these large pieces offered by Matty Collector or now HasLab, while they're awesome nostalgia pieces that remind us of our childhood and dream pieces that we always wished we could have in toys, at the end of the day, they're display pieces. We've been collecting toys for so long now that, in a way, how many more action figures are there? There's always going to be holes in people's collection. I really want Spot in Marvel Legends. But we have lots and lots and lots of individual figures. There's always going to be that holy grail that hasn't been made or you can't get yet. But all of these individual figures that you now have, and we are kind of, tapping out at the number of characters that haven't been done, shall we say. Pretty much, it's been 30 years of adult collecting. Well, now with HasLab, you have a place to display your figures to make them look even cooler. And that's what I see as really what they do and how they're the future of adult toy collecting. No longer getting individual figures, but now getting awesome display pieces to show off how cool our collections are. And I'm really excited Hasbro's doing it, and I can't wait to see what they have to do next. I'm a big fan of what they've done, and I'm looking forward to getting my Sentinel in the mail. That's going to come soon, I hope. Hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have questions or comments, please leave them below. And if you subscribe and like this video, it tells YouTube to share it with other people. So I appreciate that, because we like sharing knowledge. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.